Hello, welcome again to FAIRtax Power Radio. I'm Bob Paxton.
And I'm Bob Scarborough.
And we are the FAIRtax Guys.
There you go.
All right.
Scrolling better. You know, this thing used to be held between the two founders of FAIRtax Power Radio, Bob Paxton, and the late Ron Malero. And they would sit at the desk at the studio, which I think was Ron's house, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And one would hold one side of the banner and on the other, and they go, the FAIRtax Guys. And so it's hard to do that when Bob's in Florida and I'm in North Carolina. But
yeah,
hey,
so when we get one that's big enough to stretch from North Carolina to Florida,
right.
We can do that.
People driving on 95. What's that banner doing flying through the air?
Oh, mercy. I tell you, well, first things first here on this edition of FAIRtax Power Radio. This program will be streaming on election night.
Right.
Tuesday, November the 8th, and at 8 p.m. Eastern time, means the polls have closed in the Eastern time zone already and should be closing soon if they haven't already in the Central time zone. There is an hour or two left in the western part of the country. Yep. But we do want to encourage people to continue with their efforts to get FAIRtax candidates elected. And again, I'm reminded of what Mo Brooks told us. I'm reminded of what Marissa Selvig told us. I'm reminded of what Ted Yoho, who was the congressman here in the Florida District 3, who retired, he told us one time. All three of them say it is just a whole lot easier to elect FAIRtax people to Congress than it is to make FAIRtax supporters out of people who are already in Congress. Well, that's not to say that you shouldn't try to convince sitting Congress people, sitting congressmen, congresswomen, to get on board with the FAIRtax. But if you've got a limited amount of resources, let's focus that on recruiting and electing people who are FAIRtax candidates in the first place, and then send them on to Congress rather than you can do both, but you'll be more productive if you're trying to get candidates. FAIRtax candidates elected than changing the minds of ones that are already there.
And the other thing too about that is with regard to the officials that are the representatives that are already in Congress, make the phone calls, get friends in your district to make the phone calls, write letters, get friends in your district to write the letters. When there are enough calls and letters for the same subject, the staffers are going to say, got 100 letters this month about the FAIRtax. Representative Horschnagel, you need to take a look at this.
And something we haven't mentioned in quite a while here, there's a site called POPVOX, POPVOX, right, where you can go in, you register for an account, you give it your mailing address so that simply the software that runs that site knows where your congressional district is.
Yes.
You can go in and comment on any piece of legislation before Congress. And last time I looked, which was a while back, there's like 95% of the people who had commented on HR 25, the FAIRtax, were in favor of it. The percentage was huge. The overall numbers, not so much. So we need to get people to comment on popvox.com. And of course, all that's going to reset with the new Congress.
Sure.
So actually, after tonight, when we know who's going to be reelected and who's being reelected and what the new makeup of the next Congress is going to look like, we can start again in earnest in January when the new Congress is sworn in. And I imagine when that happens, that the candidate pledge page at fairtax.org, which is located under the Get Involved tab, we'll wipe that clean, and all of the candidate pledge signers for the 2024 election cycle, we'll start listing them there. And of course, I'm interested in watching. I mean, she just caught my attention, Marissa Selvig did, by being the first candidate in the 2022 election cycle to sign the FAIRtax pledge. So as we're recording this, and even as this is going to stream, we don't know the election results of her race, so don't know if she's going to be successfully elected to the House or not. If she is, I would love to see her be the first co-sponsor of FAIRtax in the new Congress. If for some reason she does not succeed in her run, I'd love to see her run again, and again be the first person in the country to sign the FAIRtax pledge for 2024.
Sure, absolutely. Fairtax.org is a resource that you need to select, put in your bookmarks. and go there often. Of course, the pledge that we just talked about is there. Resources like state information about who's the representative for FAIRtax in your state. You can go on there, and there's phone numbers, there's email addresses, and get in touch. And then I just noticed in South Carolina not too long ago that there's three. There's a fella down in the Low Country. There's a mutual friend in Charleston, and there's a fellow that's in the north section of the state up near Little River, believe it or not, in South Carolina. So Minnesota, Nebraska, New Hampshire, Colorado, Georgia, several in Florida. You're a representative there in Ocala. Don't wait. Don't hesitate. Go to the website, fairtax.org, and get involved. The information about your particular state is there under the Get Involved tab, state leaders list, etc.
And on the candidate pledge page, you can download a hard copy of the candidate pledge. I imagine that'll have to be updated. I think it says 2022 on it, so that'll have the PDF there will have to be updated a bit. Then when you bring that down, because it's just amazing. When one election ends, the next election cycle starts within about 24 hours. So it's never too early to start encouraging candidates to run on the FAIRtax and finding candidates who support the FAIRtax to get them to run. But we'll just see what happens. So again, we're reporting this on election night, and we can maybe have a bit more to say about this next week on FAIRtax Power Radio. But right now, I think I'm going to dig in and see what the Congress critters in what will soon be a lame duck session of Congress are still. They are still messing with the tax code this late in the session. If you go to the top of the search bar, type in the words Internal Revenue Code, put that in quotes, filters legislation in the current Congress there on the left side, you'll get 2,049 hits on that search as of the day we're recording this. And this is one. Now, I'm going to read this exactly as it's written.
Okay.
And I want you to tell me what it says, okay?
Okay.
This is HR 9198. From Representative Greg Murphy in North Carolina, right up there. I don't know where District 3 is, but North Carolina 3, Greg Murphy's, this is his bill, 9198, to amend the Employee Retirement Income Security Act of 1974 and the Internal Revenue Code of 1986 to limit fiduciary consideration of non-pecuniary factors in investment decision-making. Got that?
Could you repeat that back to the first? No, I'm just kidding.
Yes, I
Congressman
can.
Murphy is from Greenville, North Carolina, by the way. District. He's
he wants to limit fiduciary consideration of non-pecuniary factors in investment decision making. So the tax code is going to get into your decision making, but the $64,000 question to you is, what is a non-pecuniary factor?
Yeah, that's got to be one of the pecuniary. That means it's about that big, right?
No, actually, I looked that up. It means not consisting of money. So apparently there are factors in the investment decision-making process that are not, comprised of money. And so Congressman Murphy here wants to limit fiduciary consideration of those factors in investment decision-making. That almost qualifies for the Hall of Shame under the, what in the heck is that doing in the tax code?
Exactly. Now, he's the only actively practicing physician in Congress.
Oh, is he? Okay. Yeah. I don't know anything about him.
He's a Republican.
Mm-hmm.
He's been a representative in Congress since 2019. He was state representative before that, which is the path that everybody takes. But it doesn't matter, folks, Republican or Democrat, they all use the tax code to curry favor with lobbyists who they need to give them all the money to get reelected. So that's, year one, you may be doing some things, working on some legislation, hobnobbing, negotiating, and that kind of thing. And then the second year, you're in gear for your reelection campaign. So, And this happens on both sides of the aisle, and that's what's so frustrating. And a lot of people say, "Oh, this is a fair tax. That's a Republican thing or conservative thing." Or no, it's bipartisan. Continue, please.
Oh man, we'll have to do this one day. Is get into a hotly contested race, see how much that race costs, then divide that by how many days we're in the election cycle, and see how many dollars per day the candidate running has to get reelected.
It's like $14,000 a day, 12 or 14, I've heard.
Okay, I will continue, and this one is going in the Hall of Shame for sure. This is HR 9194 from Representative Ruben Gallego in Arizona, District 7. HR 9194. It is innocently called the Domestic Water Protection Act of 2022. Now, who does not want to protect our domestic water sources? But this is insane. Let me read this to you. This is to amend the Internal Revenue Code to impose an excise tax on water use during droughts and for other purposes, which again sounds kind of reasonable. But you get on down there and you say, all right, this is what we're going to do. We are going to, this is, there we go. Back this up. In general, subchapter D of chapter 32 of the Internal Revenue Code is amended by inserting after part 1 the following new part, part 2. This bill deals with water intensive crops. And it starts out with a section 4171, subsection A. There is hereby imposed a tax on the sale of any specified water intensive crop by the manufacturer, producer, or importer thereof of 300% on the price which is so sold. So if you're going to grow these water-intensive crops, i.e. food, stuff we need to eat, and if you're going to do that in a drought area, they want to sock you with a 300% tax. I kid you not.
And it's not on what you're growing, it's on where you're growing it.
Okay. Yeah, you get on farther down there under section 4172 definitions. Water intensive crop. In general, water intensive crop means a crop grown in an area experiencing prolonged drought at the time, such as the crop is grown, and B, here's the kicker, it's a crop by a manufacturer, producer, or importer which is a foreign corporation or a foreign government. So how much water it uses apparently doesn't make any difference. If it comes from a foreign corporation and is considered a water-intensive crop planted in a period of drought, it's going to be subject to a 300% tax. According to Representative Ruben Gallego, you are definitely going into the Hall of Shame with that one.
Boy, straight. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200 straight to the Hall of Shame.
Oh,
no, it's believable. I used to say that.
You can't make this stuff up. That's there. It's black and white. If you want to go to congress.gov and read it.
I wonder if the lobbyists get together and go, let's see if we can get this bill passed.
I don't know. That is just crazy. But that's a Hall of Shamer for sure. But let's move on a little bit. This is HR 9155. Now, this is one that we've actually talked about earlier on FAIRtax Power Radio, when all we had was the description. And now we've got some text in it that kind of expands on that description a little bit. This was HR 9155. We talked about this bill to amend the Internal Revenue Code to impose the alternative minimum tax on certain state-regulated electric utilities that have not fully adopted climate-resilient infrastructure. Remember talking about that one?
Yeah.
Now that we've got a little bit more to it, if you go into the summary and read the rest of the story, this bill imposes the alternative minimum tax on state-regulated electric utilities that are in bankruptcy proceedings and, here's the kicker, that make incentive-based payments other than salary to any of their 13 highest compensated employees. So that is why it is now called the No Bonuses for Executive Act.
Well, that sounds pretty reasonable.
And I'm not making that up either. That's actually there in black and white. You could read it, HR 9155.
People like to beat up on corporations executives. They really do. And they've got a hard job, though. Can you imagine being an executive of a giant corporation?
Oh, gosh. Yeah, if it was easy, anybody would do it.
Yeah.
But no, being a corporate CEO, people think all you do is sit in a corner office with your feet propped up on your desk and issuing orders all day, bringing home millions of dollars for doing nothing. Not
No, or
true at all.
sometimes you're on the couch.
Yeah, but politicians seem to like to paint a target at those guys and gals.
Well, they
And
keep everybody on their heels, and haves and have-nots and that kind of thing. And you talk about congress.gov every week, Bob, and it's to underscore how absolutely ridiculous the abuse that takes place in the tax code, and how we demand we can do better. It's just a matter of prying that lock on the tax code away from Congress. And there's only one way to do it, and that's to demand the tax on consumption conversion to a tax on consumption, the fair tax.
Well, that's why we do the congress.gov segment every week here on FAIRtax Power Radio. We want to shine a light on what is in the tax code, what people are trying to put into the tax code, and make the strongest case we can for all of that craziness needs to go away. We need to jerk it all out by the roots. And in fact, it's just nuts. So we need to jerk it out by the roots, replace the income tax with the fair tax. Don't be fooled into thinking that a flat tax will get rid of the Internal Revenue Code. It won't. It won't stay flat. It won't get rid of the IRS. You have to get rid of the entire thing. Replace the income tax with the fair tax. Wow. Okay. So that's our congress.gov segment for this week.
Yes, sir.
Let's dig into something else that just kind of makes my blood boil. Don't you love it when the government tries to tell you what you can do with your own money?
Yeah, well, yeah, they want us to work, and then they want to take it. So
yeah, but
it's actually theirs, and we try to get some of it back. Really,
this is an article from Fox Business. The IRS raises 401k contribution limit by a record amount as inflation rages. It says we are benevolently going to allow you to put more of your money into an account that has your name on it. And my response to that is, it's none of your daggum business how much money I put in my bank account in the first place.
Well, and those are the privacy concerns surrounding the Internal Revenue Service having so much information on us, where we make our money, how we make our money, how much we owe them, how much we don't owe them, and it's a battle. But the privacy issue is probably a consideration for a lot of people. And if you think about it, all the presidents that have had to show their tax returns, we want to see your tax return. They should be the ones to say, well, we're going to have an executive order and put the fair tax in. Now you can't.
Well, I'm not sure that that's constitutional, but we need to put in the fair tax anyhow.
Yeah,
but just simply, of course.
Well, there's a lot going on in the executive order business right now that is not constitutional, in my opinion. Also.
Yeah, Marissa made that note to us a couple of weeks ago. We were talking to her. But again, the 401k, I think everyone knows how that works. You put pre-tax dollars into that account. In other words, the money that you stash away in your 401k does not count in your taxable income for that year. You pay taxes on you when you get it out. But with the fair tax, there's no such thing as pre-tax dollars and after-tax dollars, because there is no tax on income. Everything you earn, you bring home the entire amount. Every dollar you earn is a pre-tax dollar because there's no tax on it to begin with. You don't pay taxes until you spend it. And so you wouldn't have the IRS telling you how much of your own money you can put away in your own retirement account. That's nuts.
Well, beginning next year, just as an example, workers are going to be allowed to contribute up to $22,500 to their 401k, which is an increase of a couple of $1,000s, a little under 10%. The biggest jump since, remember this date, 2007. Wasn't that around the time of the housing crisis?
Yeah, I kind of think it was.
The limit then was $15,500.
Mm-hmm.
They do make cost of living adjustments annually, but in times like now with painfully high inflation, the increases are more significant and impactful for taxpayers. So this is one of the reasons that they're doing this. I don't know if it's symbolic, because if you're spending more at the grocery store and on gasoline, are you going to be able to contribute more to your 401k in the
Who
midst
knows?
of all the money that you're having? So these are the things that concern the folks that are in the taxing business. I think where the government has to pay for all of the benefits that they've been shelling out over the pandemic started, and and whatever else is coming down the pike. I'm concerned that we've kind of got ourselves painted in a corner with regard to the deficit. But I really,
that's a whole different discussion. And time's getting away from us. Let's move on to one other thing. This is an interesting article from TurboTax. It's actually blog.turbotax.intuit.com if you want to go to the web address and look this up. This is, again, an article about the instability of the tax code. Apparently, the American Rescue Plan, pandemic response in March of last year, contained some changes to the tax code that are reverting back. Those changes are expiring or changing. So if you claimed any of this stuff on the last tax return you filed, and you do it the same way again on this next tax return you're going to file, you're doing it wrong.
Right. Child tax credit, child independent care credit, earned income tax credit, recovery rebate credit, sick and family leave credits for self-employed, charitable contribution deduction. The American Rescue Plan, beginning with next year, in other words, for this year, the ones that you'll file
2022 income, which you'll file your return, you'll file your return there by April 15th to 23.
There's a new Form 1099 that will take care of payments that you make and even money that you receive from like Venmo or PayPal. If it's more than $600, you're going to end up having to report that on a new Form 1099K. And they use 1099 as the catch-all for money that you make that you didn't make that shows up on your W-2.
Yeah, well, the old rule, you got that 1099K if you had 200 transactions out of 365 days and $20,000. Now they're just saying if you get more than $600 through Venmo or PayPal, you're going to get one of these 1099Ks, and it's got to go on your tax return. That's just crazy. The child tax credit was increased from $2,000 to $3,600. That's reverting back to $2,000. It extended to children up to age 17. That's reverting back, has to be under 17. So again, hopefully TurboTax, this is TurboTax's article, they've got all these things programmed into their software if you use them. But again, the idea here is just to illustrate how unstable and constantly changing the income tax is, and why we need to get rid of it and replace it with a FAIRtax.
Well, one of the things that we've talked about before with regard to throttling even the prebate within the FAIRtax, the mechanism there that supplies your return based on your size of your family and based on the poverty level. There's been discussions that we've had on our show here about how you would use the prebate to put more money into somebody's pocket on a temporary basis in times of volatility in the markets, or like we're dealing with now with inflation, that would assist families, as opposed to the labyrinth of things that we just discussed, like with the child tax credit, or how much are you going to be able to deduct using the standard deduction? How many charitable contributions are you going to be able to use to deduct if you use a standard deduction, which I think is 20 for two people? It's like $24,500 this year.
I think that's going up again. If I'm remembering right, I read an article someplace that said like 85% of taxpayers use the standard deduction. So most of your home mortgage interest, your charitable giving, medical expenses, all this stuff you think as your big deductions, most people don't take them because they don't itemize their deductions.
Well, and they don't reach the threshold of the standard. They don't make it to the level that the standard provides. So it makes it easier, time consumption wise too, but also keeping up with, the paper that you would have to keep up with to do your tax return and itemize. You have to have all that giant shoebox becomes a steamer trunk, with regard to how much you've got to keep up with. But all of that goes away with the FAIRtax. You don't have to keep paper on anything. You don't let the Internal Revenue Service, because it'll be gone. The government won't know what you make, how much you make, or where you spend your money.
I don't think that's any of the government's business, do you?
That's what I'm saying. No, that's what I'm saying. It goes away, and all that goes away.
If you think that Uncle Sam has no business knowing more about your personal finances than you do, almost. Remember the proposal that when the IRS wanted to get all these supercomputers so they could fill out your income tax return for you, they know enough about you to do that. That was one of the that hasn't gone through yet, and I'm not sure that it will. But
shouldn't.
That's crazy. It is insane that the founding fathers would be rolling over in their graves if they knew how much data and information, personal data and information, the government collects on its citizens, and most of that is done with the Internal Revenue Service. It's insane.
When the country was founded, there was no income tax.
For a reason, there was no income tax. The founding fathers saw what the effects of an income tax were in other countries that had it and said, we don't want that here.
It's been used and abused, and now it's time for us to get rid of it.
Absolutely. 1913 to 2022 is long enough to have an income tax, so we can get rid of it. I love living in a state that has no state income tax. So there's the argument, well, you've got to have an income tax to fund the government that big, is just garbage, because two of the biggest states in the country, Florida and Texas, don't have state income taxes. And if we're lucky, Alabama and Georgia are going to join us soon. Alabama and Georgia are looking to replace their state income taxes with a FAIRtax type consumption tax.
Right.
And if they're successful in doing that, and we see what that does to the state economy, that could do a lot to help get the FAIRtax passed at the national level. So if you want to work on getting the FAIRtax passed, don't overlook the fact that you can work on some of your state representatives as well, if you can persuade your state to drop their state income tax. So that is your assignment. I know there's still a state income tax in North Carolina.
Absolutely.
You need to talk to Virginia Fox up there and get her to, of course, she's in the U.S. House, not the North Carolina House, but talk to your North Carolina folks up there and say, hey, let's get rid of the income tax.
Well, and I think a lot of people are going to look at the pressure that gets relieved and the amount of time business owners, once you are not involved in the time it takes for tax compliance and the cost involved too. You'll find more time to innovate and actually be able to supply more of your income, business income, to finding employees and retaining employees, which is a difficult thing right now.
Okay, it is. Well, I'm afraid we're out of time here for this edition of FAIRtax Power Radio. Again, I want to urge as many people as possible to get involved early in the 2024 election cycle. It is starting now. Tonight's election night. So tomorrow morning, the 2024 election cycle starts. Go out to FAIRtax.org, download the pledge, get as many candidates as you can to sign it, and we'll just see what we can do next time. Until we meet again, I'm Bob Paxton.
And I'm Bob Scarborough.
The FAIRtax Guys are reminding you the FAIRtax is the only truly fair tax, and once you understand it,
you'll demand it.
So, how much will I bring home?
Go ahead.
How much do you make? We'll just say 40,000, okay? Keep it simple, throw out the deductions, all that stuff. So, you got your 40K, right? Now the first 8,000 is going to be taxed at 10%. The 8 to 33,000 is going to be taxed at 15%. And the 33 to 40, of course, is 25%. So that brings your total to $6,345.
Okay, so the average is what?
16%. Okay, and on top of that, you got Medicare, which is 1.5%, and then of course your Social Security, which is 6.2%. So actually, your new total is $9,405.
Which is
23.65%. You're getting it. You're getting it. Don't even get me started on what the boss has to pay. He's got to pay a portion of your taxes as well, so you don't have to.
Right. And you?